see everybody here this morning. Welcome, particularly if you are visiting us, or you're new here, or you're just kind of finding your feet and getting to know the community. We are glad that you are here and are joining us. We're in a series at the moment looking at this character of King David. We've got these booklets here that are also out on the table out there, but feel free to come and get one of these if you'd like. We just use this booklet kind of as an intro to the series to tell you what the series is about. And then there's also room inside to write notes. If you're a note taker, if that helps you to learn, use it. And to discuss with others. We have life groups that meet during the week and go over this material and discuss and learn together that comes off the back of that. We have a kids' life program that runs upstairs for our children during this gathering time, and so children who are school age and above are very welcome to join that program upstairs. There are leaders there that lead them through that program. If you have other kids, if kids are welcome to go up there, but they're also welcome to stay here. I know some of our kids hang around in the gathering because that's more comfortable for them with their parents as well. So that happens each week. Can I encourage you with your giving? As we gather together, we are wanting to do stuff in our community together, and it's the community that contributes to that. So if you don't have the details to do that, they're on the screen there. They're also on our website, and they go out on our e-news each week. A few things are happening in our community life. One is we've got this reading group that is happening on Tuesday mornings in a cafe just up at the over the bridge in Gordon, reading this book by Eugene Peterson. It's going through basically the same material that we are looking at on Sundays. So it's kind of like it complements what we speak about on Sundays. Really, really great book. There's also a group that's meeting in Hugh's home. Has that started, Hugh? Started last Thursday, so it's not too late to join in on that Thursday night group. That's down at Hugh's place, just down at Gordon Station. So Hugh's there. Come and talk to him, or come and talk to me, and can introduce you to be part of that if you're interested as well. I think we've got a couple of books left, do we? If you're interested in getting a book, then we've got, I think, 3 or 4 left there, or you can just get one yourself online. We have our annual church partnership meeting coming up in 2 Sundays' time, and that means today is the day where we need nominations for our deacons to be in. The deacons are the leaders in our community, and anyone who is a formal member of Gordon can be nominated for that role. Today is the day that they would need to be nominated. If you're not sure what to do about that, then come and talk to John or myself, or Cliff is over there, or any of our deacons. Come and ask if you have questions about that. We have a Young at Heart movie night happening this Friday. It was originally for Oppenheimer, but some people have already seen that, and so now it's Barbenheimer. It's for a meal in Chatswood, and then after that for dinner. So it's 6 p.m. for dinner, and then the movie's happening after that. So anyone who's young at heart, you have to be above school age, so uni age and above. But if you're young at heart, then you're welcome to come along to that. And Misa's at the back. Erica's not here today, so chat to Misa if you've got questions about that, and you can come along this Friday. You might have noticed that we've been doing some upgrades to our AV and our sound, and if you're interested in that and interested in learning what we're doing there, next Sunday after this 10:30 gathering, we're going to be doing an introduction to the changes that we've been making and what we see in the future for that. So if you're interested in the tech stuff, and live stream and video and sound, or if you're a musician and you're interested in being part of the team, or if you're a set designer or interested in design and want to help us to link what we do in our design in the room with our series that we go through, then that's the type of creative stuff that we're looking for people to be involved in. If you're interested in any of that, then next Sunday, we're going to have, just get some barbecue chickens for lunch, and we'll meet in here and run through that. Maggie? That would be a good thing, to RSVP, to let us know if you're going to be here. So let me know, or let Maggie know, or let Chris know at the back. That'd be great. Partnership Sunday, as I said, 2 Sundays' time. That's where we gather everyone from our community together for a big celebration day. We have a big gathering in here, which includes our worship together as well as our meeting as a church, and that's where our deacons are nominated. And then we're going to have lunch, kind of spread out probably everywhere, but primarily next door here. And we would love you to RSVP if you can come to lunch. That is on our e-news, which goes out each Thursday. If you don't get that, come and ask me, and I can give you the link to know how to RSVP to come along to lunch in 2 Sundays' time. Will be a great celebration for us as a church community. Then, in beginning of September, there's a young adults gathering, which is for the Northern Region Baptist churches, and there'll be a speaker at this gathering talking about work and faith and how they interrelate. You can talk to Miso about that one too. There's a registration link there if you want to take a photo and see how to register for that. But Miso is the person to let you know more about that. And then finally, we have, in terms of announcements, we have a vote coming up, presumably sometime this year. We haven't told when yet. The Voice referendum, and we're going to have a forum together to have a conversation about how we might approach making a decision there, because anyone who is an Australian citizen needs to make a decision on this vote. We're not going to tell you what to vote, but we'll have a discussion together on how to vote and an approach that might be helpful to take. So keep that date, Sunday the 17th of September. It'll be here in the afternoon for a discussion. I also just wanted to give you an update. Some of you might remember earlier this year, I let you know about a need. Pern and Pip, who are over in Cambodia, Pern's sister Reet had been diagnosed with bone cancer, and she had needed some pretty quick treatment. And just wanted to give you an update on where she is up to. She has had now 3 rounds of chemotherapy as well as radiotherapy, and she is back at home in Cambodia with her family. She's able to walk around her house. She's seeing improvements. The cancers in her body have been shrinking with that treatment, and so Pip asked me if I would just give you an update. And thank you for your support for them. I know some of you have given to that need and have been praying for them, and so she just wanted to say thank you and appreciate your support in that way. I'm going to pass over to John. I'm going to read first. Yeah, sure. So we're going to read. It's a long reading from 1 Samuel 20. So I might read it for us, and you can follow along this story that John will then come and unpack. Then David fled from Naioth in Ramah and came and said before Jonathan, "What have I done? What is my guilt? And what is my sin before your father that he seeks my life?" And he said to him, "Far from it, you shall not die. Behold, my father does nothing either great or small without disclosing it to me. And why should my father hide this from me? It is not so." But David vowed again, saying, "Your father knows well that I have found favor in your eyes, and he thinks, 'Do not let Jonathan know this, lest he be grieved. But truly as the Lord lives and as your soul lives, there is but a step between me and death.' David said to Jonathan, 'Behold, tomorrow it is the new moon, and I should not fail to sit at table with the king. But let me go, that I might hide myself in the field till the 3rd day at evening. If your father misses me at all, then say, David earnestly asked to leave of me to run to Bethlehem, his city, for there is a yearly sacrifice there for all the clan. If he says, good, it will be well with your servant. But if he is angry, then know that harm is determined by him. Therefore, deal kindly with your servant, for you have brought your servant into a covenant of the Lord with you. But if there is guilt in me, kill me yourself. For why should you bring me to your father?' And Jonathan said, 'Far be it from you. If I knew that it was determined by my father that harm should come to you, would I not tell you?' Then David said to Jonathan, "Who will tell me if your father answers you roughly?" And Jonathan said to David, "Come, let us go out into the field." So they both went out into the field. And Jonathan said to David, "The Lord, the God of Israel, be witness. When I have sounded out my father about this time tomorrow or the third day, look, if he is well disposed toward David, shall I not then send and disclose it to you? But should it please my father to do you harm, the Lord do so to Jonathan, and more also if I do not disclose it to you and send you away, that you may go in safety. May the Lord be with you, as he has been with my father. If I am still alive, show me the steadfast love of the Lord, that I may not die. And do not cut off your steadfast love from my house forever, when the Lord cuts off every one of my enemies of David from the face of the earth." And Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, "May the Lord take vengeance on David's enemies." And Jonathan made David swear again by his love for him, for he loved him as he loved his own soul. Then Jonathan said to him, "Tomorrow is the new moon, and you will be missed, because your seat will be empty. On the third day, go down quickly to the place where you hid yourself when the matter was in hand, and remain beside the stone heap. And I will shoot 3 arrows to the side of it, as though I shot at a mark." I think I skipped one. "And behold, I will send the boy, saying, 'Go find the arrows.' If I say to the boy, 'Look, the arrows are on this side of you, take them,' then you are to come, for as the Lord lives, it is safe for you, and there is no danger. But if I say to the youth, 'Look, the arrows are beyond you,' then go, for the Lord has sent you away. And as for the matter of which you and I have spoken, behold, the Lord is between you and me forever." So David hid himself in the field. And when the new moon came, the king sat down to eat food. The king sat on his seat, as at other times, on the seat by the wall. Jonathan sat opposite, and Abner sat by Saul's side. But David's place was empty. Yet Saul did not say anything that day, for he thought, "Something has happened to him. He is not clean. Surely he is not clean." But on the second day, the day after the new moon, David's place was empty. And Saul said to Jonathan his son, "Why has not the son of Jesse come to the meal, either yesterday or today?" Jonathan answered Saul, "David earnestly asked to leave of me to go to Bethlehem." He said, "Let me go, for our clan holds a sacrifice in the city, and my brother has commanded me to be there. So now if I have found favor in your eyes, let me get away and see my brothers. For this reason he has not come to the king's table." Then Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan, and he said to him, "You son of a perverse, rebellious woman, do I not know that you have chosen the son of Jesse to your own shame, and to the shame of your mother's nakedness? For as long as the son of Jesse lives on the earth, neither you nor your kingdom shall be established. Therefore send and bring him to me, for he shall surely die." Then Jonathan answered Saul his father, "Why should he be put to death? What has he done?" But Saul hurled his spear at him to strike him. So Jonathan knew that his father was determined to put David to death. And Jonathan rose from the table in fierce anger and ate no food the second day of the month, for he was grieved for David, because his father had disgraced him. In the morning, Jonathan went out into the field to the appointment with David, and with him a little boy. And he said to his boy, "Run and find the arrows that I shoot." As the boy ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. And when the boy came to the place of the arrow that Jonathan had shot, Jonathan called after the boy and said, "Is not the arrow beyond you?" And Jonathan called after the boy, "Hurry, be quick, do not stay." So Jonathan's boy gathered up the arrows and came to his master. But the boy knew nothing. Only Jonathan and David knew the matter. And Jonathan gave his weapons to his boy and said to him, "Go and carry them to the city." And as soon as the boy had gone, David rose from beside the stone heap and fell on his face to the ground and bowed 3 times. And they kissed one another and wept with one another, David weeping the most. Then Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, because we have sworn both of us in the name of the Lord, saying, 'The Lord shall be between me and you, and between my offspring and your offspring forever.' And he rose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city."
Thanks, Steve. It's a cracking story, isn't it? What do you think? Yeah. We could probably just finish up there. Why don't I pray? God, we have amazing stories, and we each have a story in our own life. We see you active in that story, and we want you to be active in our stories. So speak to us today, we pray. In Jesus' name. Amen. We know many of the songs that David wrote. We have them in an old songbook. We call it the Psalter or the Book of Psalms. At the end of our time together, I'm going to play you a song that maybe Jonathan could have written. It includes some lines which say this. It says, "You've got a friend in me when the road looks rough ahead, and you're miles and miles from your nice warm bed. You've got troubles, I've got them too. There isn't anything I wouldn't do for you. We stick together and we see it through." Some other folks might be a little bit smarter than I am, bigger and stronger too, maybe. But none of them will ever love you the way I do. As the years go by, our friendship will never die. We're going to see it's our destiny. You've got a friend in me. Do you know that song? Some of you know that song. It's from Toy Story. Toy Story is not a story about toys. It's a kid's movie, but it's all about friendship, the complexities of friendship. And our Bible passage is a bit like that. It uses the drama, the plot. It's exciting and lots of stuff's going on. There's arrows shooting and people hiding and running and spears being chucked. But it's not about those events. It's about the complexities of friendship. And that's what we're going to look at today. 1 Samuel's exploring those dynamics, and it has this picture for us between 2 friends, David and Jonathan. And this story sits in the book of 1 Samuel, and we see what God is doing both in their individual lives, their personal story, but that's part of a longer story of God bringing his kingdom. And that's the focus of this long narrative. What does it look like when God brings his kingdom amongst people? And how does that impact them? So today I'm not going to talk about new moon festivals and ancient archery and all that sort of stuff. That's interesting, but I don't think that's really what's going to be useful to us. I want to think about what is our personal story? How does that fit in the story of God's kingdom coming now? And where is friendship in the midst of that for you and us as God's people? Is that okay? So that's going to be our focus. This story of David and Jonathan brackets a few chapters from chapters 18, 19 and 20. And it starts with some words and ends with some words. And everything that happens is contained in this theme of friendship. So after David defeats Goliath, and that's an old picture of what happens afterwards, he comes into Saul's house permanently. He was there sometimes maybe playing the lyre, but he comes in, he's promoted in the army, and these 2 guys become friends. And chapter 18 starts out this way. As soon as David, had finished speaking to Saul after he killed Goliath, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. That's how it opens. Then we have all the drama of the narrative, the events that come through the next few chapters. And then at the very end of the story, these 2 friends will part, not knowing if they will ever see each other again. Because David's got to go on the run because Saul wants to kill him. And that's the warning that we've just read about. And as they depart, not knowing if they'll see each other again, we have the other end of the bracket. Then Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace. because we have sworn both of us in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord shall be between me and you, and between my offspring and your offspring forever. And he rose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city. Between those two brackets, beginning of chapter 18, end of chapter 20, we have 6 attempts by Saul to kill David. Twice throwing his own spear at the young man who ducks and weaves and sticks in the wall. Twice Saul uses the lure, like he's fishing, and the bait is one of his daughters. If you go into war and fight all these Philistines, I'll give you one. Oh, well, not her then. I'll give you the other. In a plan to have David killed. And twice Saul sends hit squads. First to David's home, and he's saved by his wife, Michal, who lets him out through a window and away. And then secondly, when David has fled to be with Samuel, he's at the school of the prophets, and 3 times Saul sends hit squads, but somehow they turn from murderers to worshippers. So within the bracket of friendship, there are these 6 attempts at David's life by Saul, which all fail. And we saw, as we looked at it last week, that God brings surprising friends into the life of David. Friends from within Saul's own family. His son, Jonathan, his daughter, Michal. He brings Saul's own mentor, Samuel, to rescue David. And most surprisingly, God is his friend, who works in some strange way by his Spirit to change these murderers into worshippers. You have a friend in me. God works both directly and indirectly through people to help David. But everyone involved in helping David must pay a cost. Human beings and God himself. To have a friendship with David is costly. Things are not easy and smooth. Most obviously, that's for Jonathan. Of all the human characters, he, I think, pays the most. Because, well, what's he giving up? He's giving up his own place. He should be the one to be the next king. He should inherit the throne. And that's his tension with his dad. And he says, what are you idiot son? Don't you realise for this guy to become king, you're not going to be king. But Jonathan embraces and is willing to pay that cost. This murderous rage that takes hold of Saul is actually embraced by by Jonathan as a cost he will pay to promote David as friend. 1 Samuel 18:4 says, Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him and gave it to David, and his armour and even his sword and his bow and his belt. Here is a symbolic action of saying, you have all this royal gear now that belongs to you because I believe this is what God is doing. It's now yours, not mine. You will be the next king. In chapter 23 and verse 17, he says to him, you will be king over Israel. He looks into the future. He has eyes of faith, and he says, I pay that cost. You, not me, will be king. Saul's furious with that, but Jonathan embraces that. Saul says, for as long as the son of Jesse lives on the earth, neither you nor your kingdom shall be established. Therefore send and bring him to me, for he shall surely die. But Jonathan confronts his father, and he risks his own life, because Saul in his fury then tries to kill Jonathan, his son, by throwing a spear at him, as we've just heard. You have a friend in me. The relationship between Jonathan and David is often described as the greatest friendship in the Bible. My question is this: is it? I don't think it is. I don't think it's even friendship at all. The word friend never actually occurs in the text. But more importantly, it's not balanced. Jonathan is the one who does all the giving. David gives nothing. Jonathan gets no or little emotional reward from David. It's a very one-sided relationship where Jonathan bears all the cost. There's no reciprocity. There's no giving both ways. So I said last week that the Bible narrates stories and tells us about characters seen in their actions, not so much it doesn't discuss or disclose their motives. And so we need to imagine ourselves, what's the person thinking and feeling and doing to help us make the story bring meaning. Another thing to do when you read a story is watch for what is not said. Not just what is said, but what is deliberately left out, because that will give you a clue as to what the character is thinking and doing. So, with that in mind, I just want to do two things. Look mainly at David, and then more briefly at Jonathan. And what do we learn from each of them about this issue of friendship? Why? So that we understand guys long dead? No. So that we can reflect on our own approach to friendship. Because friendship is essential for us, not just for life and living well, but essential for discipleship, for following Jesus. And so that's, I think, why we have these stories. So let's first look at David the friend. As Steve, in a great sermon, explained to us, David's incredibly cunning in the way that he enlists himself to fight and then kill Goliath. 3 times he says, what do I get? What's in it for me if I do this? And it seems that cunning, calculating attitude is one that David brings into his friendships, his relationships, including with Jonathan. And we should start to wonder, as we look at the story of David, does he just use people? Does he just use people for his own ends? People help David all the time, and he relies upon that. They do good for him, and they care for him and save him. They are loving friends to him. But if you read carefully, he is always the object of that verb to love. David is never said to love anyone. It's always people that love him. Does David ever really love anyone? So, for example, later in the story we'll read, Michal, his wife, he abandons. Father marries her off to somebody else. Happily, Paltiel, a man who loves her. But when David is going to ascend the throne, he makes a political agreement to bring her back into his home as his wife again. Not caring about her needs, it's a political strategy with Abner, who inherits Saul's line as the general in his army. He doesn't give a toss about the feelings of his wife. And when we get to that passage, we'll have a tragic story where Paltiel, the husband of Michal, walks after her, weeping at the love that is now destroyed. And he's told, go back or you had it, buddy. David doesn't care about Michal. He doesn't love her. She's just useful to him politically. And I think that also applies to his relationship with Jonathan. Jonathan clearly loves David, and he says so, and he acts in that. But we never read of David's love for him. David never speaks of his love for Jonathan. You see that even in the covenant that they make together, the bond, the agreement that they make together. Notice something simple but profound in what the text says about that relationship. The covenant is based on Jonathan's love for David. That's what he does. He initiates, he instigates this agreement, and David says, all right, I'll comply. It's Jonathan that swears the oath to be loyal. He is the one who will work and live for David in a hostile environment under his father's fury. David's got to promise nothing except, I won't kill your kids. There's nothing that Jonathan gets out of the relationship. And that's how they live for the rest of their lives together. We'll see this outwork as we get to later chapters. But when you get to the very end of the story, not to spoil it, Saul and Jonathan both die in battle. And David now is safe to come back, and he leads the people in national lament. And you might think, here at last, he will express his love for his friend. But if you go to 2 Samuel chapter 1, you see this, what looks like a beautiful poem, a lament. But if you read it carefully, it's not. It's gilding the lily for political consumption. David makes a public speech of how great Saul was. It's like, have you ever been to a funeral and they give the eulogy and it's all positive, good, and everyone's sitting there, yeah, that's, okay, but that's only half the story. It's one of those sort of speeches. Great Saul, how much he was such a good leader, we miss him so much. Nonsense. And then at last he gets to Jonathan, and you think, well, okay, here's the chance to say something. This is what he says. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. Very pleasant have you been to me. Your love to me was extraordinary, surpassing the love of women. That sounds like the grief of love in David, but it's not. He loves Jonathan's love. He loves that this guy was so good to him. It's not that he misses his friend. He misses the help that his friend gave to him. Your love is greater than the love for any woman. And that's an interesting thing for him to say because he had some pretty complex romantic relationships, David. We'll get to that too. But it's all one-way traffic. What he valued in him was not Jonathan as a person, but Jonathan as someone who could help him. What do you think about that sort of relationship? What do you think about how to approach friendship from that perspective? I don't want to overplay it. I don't want to say that, David was a total ratbag. He wasn't. He wasn't a total Machiavellian character that, was scheming all the time. He's not a man without emotion. When they part in that scene in the field, they do weep. And David weeps more than Jonathan. I think he's rattled. And he expresses that. But I think Jonathan knew that this guy is flawed. If you really know and trust someone and are confident in their love, you're not going to ask them to make a promise, please don't kill my children. You just would not do that. The custom, the culture in the ancient Near East, as it is in many places today, was when a new dynasty comes in, you kill off all your rivals. And the Romans were great at doing that sort of stuff. And he says, well, I think David will do whatever he thinks is best for David. So I'm going to ask him to promise, do not kill my descendants. When you become king, if I'm still here, don't kill me and don't kill my kids. Let's live two houses together in peace. Instinctively, he knows David does what is best for David. And I think the writer wants to give that message to us because it sums up their relationship in this way. The final encounter, the last time that they meet one another in chapter 23. David saw that Saul had come out to seek his life, one of many times that happens. David was in the wilderness of Ziph at Horish. And Jonathan, Saul's son, rose and went to David at Horish and strengthened his hand in God. Look who's doing all the work. And he said to him, do not fear, for the hand of Saul my father shall not find you. You shall be king over Israel, and I shall be next to you. Saul my father also knows this. And the two of them made a covenant before the Lord, another agreement. David remained at Horish, and Jonathan went home. But notice who's doing all the promising. Notice who's doing all the encouraging and strengthening. Yet again, it is Jonathan. And I think that's the picture that emerges of their relationship. Without Jonathan, David surely would have lost his life. He would never have become king. This guy was vital for him. He was a true friend. You have a friend in me, he could sing with integrity. But I don't think David could ever sing that back to Jonathan. What of David? Clearly he was pleased to have Jonathan as his friend, but he did little in return. What is this story asking us to consider? Why do we have this picture of their friendship? What is God trying to say to us about how we do our friendships? I want to suggest three things really quickly. Firstly is this. Friendships help David get through life, but they don't form him deeply. They don't form him. They're not a priority for him. What about you? How important are good friendships to you? Are they a priority to you? I think this is a really valuable lesson, especially for religious people like us. Because we can think that it's just about me and God that forms me. But that is never the story of the Bible. We could look on many pages that say that. It seems that David is faithful to God in the midst of being unfaithful to people. And don't you know religious people who are like that? Who make who know all the right stuff and have the reputation of being mature and spiritual people, but are hopeless in their human relationships. The two must always go together. This forms our spirituality. It gives a different perspective. I think David perhaps poured all his energy into his relationship with God, which is why we have these beautiful psalms. So he writes this wonderful poetry, all the while being a hopeless friend and a ratbag in how he treats women, how he treats servants, how he treats friends, how he treats his father, the whole situation. Let me confess something. I am like David in that regard. I think I've said this to you before. My family, where I grew up, I was very independent. I was left to do my own thing. And so I learnt that I just rely upon myself. And I organise things to just do the best for John. Now, the positive side of that was that it made me very self-reliant, very independent. I didn't need anybody. That's valuable sometimes. But it's also very distorting. When I became a Christian, I realised, well, I need God. But I live life with God the same way that I lived without God. In contradiction of John Donne, I was an island entire unto myself. But I let God on the island. And so I thought, if it's just me and God, I can do anything because I've got God as friend. I don't need anybody else. I can be very independent. And that gets encouraged in churches, you know. We can do more than we'll be more than conquerors or something. You know, if you've got God on your side, you can do anything. I don't need people. And that's a horrible and deforming way to live. It's taken me a long time to realise, no, actually, I do need people as part of my spirituality. How will I learn to deal with my anger? How will I learn to be humble? How will I learn to be gracious? What will make me loving or forgiving? Not just sitting and praying, but interacting with people where I have challenges to be loving or less angry or less short-tempered or more humble or more forgiving. That's where I grow. And the two things must go together. So if I don't have deep human relationships, I'm going to be a stunted person, a stunted Christian. That's why a community of committed friendships is so essential for our spiritual life. It's not just that, but it's not less than that. That's the way that God has designed human beings to live. Second thing I think I learned from this is that we need human friendship to tease out that spirituality. This is the means of God growing you. So David went deep with God in one way, but very shallow. His character never flourished because he didn't deal well with human relationships. We need others. It's only in meeting others that I meet my true self, that I actually find out who I am and see, oh, I never knew I had that inside me, because another person draws it out of me. And as I meet other people, I meet myself and therefore have the capacity to change myself in the way that God directs me. That's where we work on our stuff. All of us, I think, like David, have stuff in our background that shapes how we relate to other people. Patterns of behaviour, our psychology is formed by those human relationships, and we bring that into our spiritual life. Things from the past. We are all our own history. History is not the past. History is what we bring into the present with us. We all live out our history now. That's important to remember when you relate to other people. I think, and I catch myself doing this, we all assume everyone's normal. None of us are normal. And so you think when someone behaves in an abnormal way, or they're choosing to be bad. They're not. They're being shaped by their experiences, their past, events, traumas, problems, patterns, things that they've been taught that have said, this is how you live. And it makes them do weird things. And so I need to be alert to that. That people are driven by forces that we can't see. All of us are. You are. I am. And so when I relate to other people, I need to cut them a bit of slack sometimes. Or I need to be alert that sometimes people bring more into a relationship than is on the surface. They can smile nicely, but there are other things happening inside of them. And I need to factor that in. That's really difficult to deal with. Now think of David. We can't diagnose him at a distance. And the biblical writers don't understand the brain and human psychology the way that we do. They don't have this rich understanding, which is now emerging, of what controls human behaviour. But they give us a picture of this guy. I think if a psychiatrist sat down with him, they'd say, you have narcissistic personality disorder. Okay? And you think, well, hang on, that's a bit rich, John. How can you say that? Look at his behaviour. Look at the way he behaves. All of us are on this spectrum of narcissism. They say 6.5% of Australians at any one time are struggling with a personality disorder. Maybe between 10 and 14% will experience this in their life. That's a lot of us. That means some of you in the room now have this. Maybe me. We need to think about that. It explains why people behave as they do, but they're not choosing to be bad. And that's the thing we must remember. They're not choosing to be bad. David wasn't choosing to be bad. He was driven by things within himself. Maybe from his relationships with his dad and his brothers, we see some stuff there. But things that had happened to him shaped him. But he never dealt with it. We can blame the past, or we can deal with our past. We need to deal with our past. The key message, and maybe if you want some more information, I'd send you to this organisation out of Wollongong University, Project Air, that has some details. I think yesterday's Good Weekend in the Sydney Morning Herald had an article on this. It was quite a good article, if you want to read it. It speaks about how these things shape us, but the key message is this. It's not that these people are bad. These people are us. But things control us in a way that we need to face up to and deal with. And in fact, it was probably David's narcissism that made him so good. He was so bold and courageous because he thought, God's on my side, I can do anything. I can beat a giant, not a problem. I don't care what all you guys say, you're wrong, I'm right. He always had this self-confidence. It also made him deeply introspective because he was only consumed with himself. That's why we have such rich psalms, because he sits and he ponders and he chews over his own life. And he comes out with beauty and creativity and music and poetry because he's consumed with his own life. So actually, his narcissism was a strength. You know, Asperger's, autism. It can be a strength in some jobs to be absolutely focused on details. Employers are recognising this now. They're the people you want to sit in front of a computer screen for 10 hours and pick the thing that's not in the pattern. I couldn't do that, but other people can. So what is classed by some people as a disorder or a failure is actually a strength. And it's the same with all of these personality disorders. We are all on this spectrum. But some people, it gets out of control for them. And I think David was this. Is that okay? Maybe it's a little bit unusual, but I just want to put that out there. Last thing, and I'm almost done. When you look at David, you can see friendship can be intentionally unequal for a purpose. What's your picture of David and Jonathan? Imagine you're writing the movie and you're going to cast the characters. Who do you pick? You're probably picking two young guys, outdoors type, like adventure, shooting arrows and chasing things in the bush, who are peers, who are mates. That's not the story. They're not peers. If you look through the information we have, you realise they are not the same age at all. There's a huge age gap. Jonathan is much older than David. We read that David was 30 when he became king. Saul reigned for 40 years. So Saul is reigning for 10 years when David is born. 3 years into Saul's reign, we read of Jonathan fighting in the army. The law said you can't join the army till you're 20. So when David is born, Jonathan is at least 27, maybe more. They're a generation apart. He's as old as his father. And I think that's the picture of this intergenerational relationship that we should carry into this relationship. You might read the story and you see David killing Goliath, and then in the next verse, Jonathan's pledging his heart and soul to him. You think, man, that was quick. maybe there's some backstory that we should assume, that he watched him playing the harp, or he listened very carefully to what David said to Saul. But I think Jonathan sees something in this guy and says, this guy's got potential. This guy, I think, is somehow involved in God's purposes, and I believe that. Therefore, I am going to focus on this guy to mentor him. And that's the friendship that Jonathan offers. He's a mentor. We need those relationships. Just don't call it mentoring, because that scares people off. Just be a friend. If you look back on your own life, you'll see you've had mentors, people that have helped you. Can you be such a person? Can you be a Jonathan? How do you do that? Pursue friendship. It says to us that we need friends that are more than just our peers, that are the same as us. So different gender, different age, different ethnicity, different cultural background, different job, different life experience, different family situation. We need a complex variety of people who will help us grow and draw stuff out. I think that's what Jonathan is doing, and I think that's what is so admirable about his friendship. This is a picture of what a good friendship is like from one person's side. The failures of David highlights the beauty and strengths of Jonathan. Let me finish off very quickly, just saying a few more things about Jonathan, the loyal friend. And this brings us more into the passage that Steve read to us. As you think about these things, my purpose is think about yourself. How much am I like this or not like this? The chapter starts, as Steve read, where David comes to Jonathan and he pours out his soul in lament. What the heck have I done that your father wants to kill me? I don't understand what's going on. And Jonathan listens to, just imagine how hard that is to listen to. And he takes seriously. He doesn't necessarily believe it at this point. He says, no, that's not true. He's not going to kill you. But he takes seriously the complaints of his friend and he acts accordingly. Have you ever had that experience? To listen and sit with difficult information, confronting information. This is what a friend does. And Jonathan responds. And he communicates back to David with integrity. He says, okay, I take seriously what you say. I'm going to act upon that information, and you can trust what I say back to you. For example, if I knew that it was determined by my father that harm should come to you, would I not tell you? David said to Jonathan, well, who's going to tell me if your father answers roughly? And he says, well, I will. Get out in the field and we'll play this game with arrows, and I'll communicate to you. I will warn you. Should it please my father to do you harm, the Lord do so to Jonathan and more also, if I do not disclose it to you and send you away that you might go in safety. You can trust my words. That's what a friend is like. They communicate with integrity. Sometimes we can be tempted not to be true, even with our closest friends. We hide things that are uncomfortable, things that we don't want to face, things that might make the relationship more challenging, things that are embarrassing about ourselves, things that we wish that weren't there. And we play a role. Jonathan doesn't do that. He communicates with integrity. Second thing, he says something amazing. Do you pick up just how amazing this is, what he says to Jonathan? May the Lord be with you as he has been with my father. He's just such an optimistic, positive guy, this guy. If I'm still alive, show me the steadfast love of the Lord that I may not die. And do not cut off your steadfast love from my house forever, when the Lord cuts off every one of the enemies of David from the face of the earth. And who's he thinking about? Who's David's chief enemy at the moment? Saul. And Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, may the Lord take vengeance on David's enemies. What a thing to say. And Jonathan made David swear again by his love for him, for he loved him as he loved his own soul. A friend commits with faithfulness. And by that I mean not just that he's true to his word, which he is, he's faithful to his word, but he has the vision of faith. He looks into the future of David's life and he can imagine one day you are going to be the king. I am not going to be the king. And in that day, Don't be like all the other ancient Near Eastern rulers and kill off my family. Make this promise to me, because I believe this is God's purpose in you. And I think this is what a friend does to another friend. They say, where is God at work in you? What is God wanting to grow in you that I can encourage? That is faith-filled friendship. That's how we encourage one another. That's how we strengthen one another. That's how Jonathan was strengthening, encouraging David. Don't give up, mate. God will be faithful to his promise. This is going to happen. You're not going to die. You're going to be king, because God has said he's going to do this. Friends do that for each other. They look at each other and say, what is God doing in your life that I can help flourish? That's the best type of friendship, I think. And that's how the story finishes, and I'm just about to finish too. After they do this game with the arrows, the signal, if it's further, go further, boy. That's telling David, run away. If it's near, no, I shot it, it's closer, come. He's saying to David, come back. As soon as the boy had gone, David rose from beside the stone heap and fell on his face to the ground and bowed 3 times. And they kissed one another and wept with one another, David weeping the most. Then Jonathan said to David, go in peace, because we have sworn both of us in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord shall be between me and you, and between my offspring and your offspring forever. And he rose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city. A true friend like Jonathan cares with affection. Jonathan is emotionally present and expressive to his friend. He feels deeply the pain because he cares deeply in love. These are the wounds of love. And he creates a relationship with David that allows for this expression of affection. He makes it safe to do so. Now, some people read that and get really nervous. What's happening here? These 2 blokes kissing each other and cuddling and weeping on top of each other. I don't know if you have that reaction, but some people have that reaction. They get nervous and think, oh, no. Or they get really excited and think, oh, homosexual story in the Bible, you beauty. How should we read that? Some people will point to verses like this, which say, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David. The writer's sneakily saying that he loves him like they want to be married together. But knitted together is the same word used of Jacob's relationship with his son Benjamin, his favourite son. Doesn't necessarily imply a sexual relationship. Or what about here? Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Verse 1 or verse 3, Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. He loves him. But loved is the same word describing how Saul loves David, how Michal loves David, and how all of the people feel about David. Not necessarily a sexual word, love. Well, what about this one? Jonathan, Saul's son, delighted much in David. Delighted, took pleasure, delight. It's the same word used of Saul's own attitude to David in chapter 18, verse 22. I don't think it's conveying a sexual relationship. I don't think their relationship was a homosexual relationship. I don't think it was even a friendship. I think this older man cared and nurtured this younger man as a mentor. It was all one-way traffic. And that's what all those verses says. It's always Jonathan's love. For David, he was always doing him good. It's not just me that thinks that. A really good book on friendship, if you want to read a good one, is by Victor Lee Austin. And he says in one of his footnotes, you've got to track it down, it says, to my mind, the claim that the Bible points to a homoerotic friendship between David and Jonathan founders on the point that the Bible does not point to it as a friendship. I would agree with that comment. David is not a good friend to Jonathan, but Jonathan is a loving friend to David. And after all that transpires, and they go back to the festival, when they part, that's what carries on for Jonathan. He remains loyal to his friend despite living in an anti-David house. His father never stops trying to kill his friend. And he says to Jonathan, you've got to come with me on these chases. And he does. Imagine how difficult that is. Everyone in his circle is saying, we've got to get this guy, we've got to kill him, he's evil, we've got to get rid of him. And he resists that pressure. That's how loyal he is as a friend. And when David behaves badly, and he does, and he behaves badly even to Jonathan, he stays loyal to his friend. He doesn't say, well, I'm sick of you, I'm off. He retains that loyalty all the way to the end. And despite David's failures, Jonathan is a friend. He cares with affection, he expresses that love, and he acts in love. And that reminds us of another friend. Jonathan, I think, is a picture of Jesus, because this is how Jesus is friends to us. He makes this covenant with us. He bears all the costs. He remains faithful when we are faithless. He loves when we are unloving. This is the friend we have in Jesus, who teaches us how to have better friendships with others. This is the way he's instructing us in. Makes me wonder, if Jonathan was so good, when Saul dies, who should have become the next king? Jonathan. What the heck is God doing? He could have had a great guy as king, and he picks a ratbag David. God is extremely mysterious, isn't he? I can't understand it. But I think that's the point of the story. That's the world we live in. Our job is to be like Jonathan, to be a faithful friend. Our job is to be like Jesus, who comes into a world where his own receive him not, where he's betrayed by his friends, where someone kisses him as an act of betrayal. This is the story we are part of. And this is how this story should shape our individual stories and us as the people living in the kingdom of God. I think I've talked long enough. Let me pray. Lord Jesus, we thank you that you are our friend. There is no friend like you. What a friend we have in Jesus. Teach us, instruct us in this way of friendship. Help us pay the cost. Help us to be people of grace and loyalty as we are friends with one another. We pray this, that your name would be honoured. Amen. I think we're going to sing an old song.